In previous videos, I have talked about autoantibodies in ME-CFS and Long Covid and the pathological effect which they can play in these illnesses. When I have talked about treatments, I have focused on the research into immunoadsorption, a blood washing procedure available in certain German dialysis centres which can remove these autoantibodies from the body. But there are actually a range of further options for treating these autoantibodies, and a recent paper has reviewed these. In today's video, I'm going to be talking more about what these treatments are, what they can do, what the research shows in relation to their efficacy. But first, my name is Patrick Usher, and I am author of the book Understanding ME-CFS and Strategies for Healing, in which I break down some of the latest, most exciting research into these conditions, as well as talking about the various treatment strategies that I have tried in order to improve my own quality of life as an ME-CFS patient. You can find links to buy the book, as well as to a free sample, in the description box below. So very briefly, before we come to this paper, if you're completely new to the topic of autoantibodies in ME-CFS and Long Covid, I strongly recommend that you go and find my playlist on my channel, which talks about the autoimmune problems in ME-CFS, and watch some of the videos there to get a closer idea of effects that these autoantibodies can have and the role they play in ME-CFS and Long Covid. But in the briefest possible nutshell, these autoantibodies can exert certain effects, in particular limiting the perfusion of blood into the muscles and brain, limiting the capacity of the heart to pump effectively. They can contribute to the development of low blood volume, and they can further worsen the cellular and mitochondrial issues which occur in ME-CFS. Now, most typically, the autoantibodies that researchers believe are implicated in ME-CFS belong to a specific category of autoantibodies called autoantibodies against G-protein coupled receptors. These include autoantibodies against beta-1 and beta-2 receptors, also against alpha-1 through 5 receptors and muscarinic 1 through 5 receptors. And these will all, when you have these autoantibodies, will all play a role in messing with the normal functioning of these receptors. Now, more recent research is indicating that there also exist other autoantibodies that can be playing a mischievous role in ME-CFS, including some which can contribute to the muscular calcium overload. So it's likely it's not just the G-protein coupled receptor autoantibodies that are at play in ME-CFS. As I've previously talked about, immunoadsorption, this blood washing procedure, is very good at taking these autoantibodies out, although it might not lead to a long-term improvement in some patients because the mechanisms which still create these autoantibodies, which are produced in the B cells, can still be active even after you've taken the autoantibodies out. And so a lot of the treatments that we're talking about today are more focused on coming at the problem from a different angle. And so now we come to the paper that I'm going to be talking about today, which was published in April of 2025, and its title is Autoantibody Targeting Therapies in Post-Covid Syndrome and Myalgic Encephalomyelitis / Chronic Fatigue Syndrome by Professor Scheibenbogen et al. And this paper looks at a range of treatments: Rituximab, Efgartigimod, Daratumumab, the immunoadsorption, which we will not be talking about in today's video. Please go and check out my previous videos on immunoadsorption for more about it. Berlin Cures 007, and IVIG or intravenous immunoglobulins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly go through all of these, tell you about the key points of each treatment, what do we know from the research, how do these things work, and at the very end we will think about what does all of this information tell us about the nature of ME-CFS in general, who are these treatments likely to work for, and are there other options that may be coming in the future as well. So first of all, Rituximab. Now, quite a lot of you may have heard of this already because it is a drug that is often discussed in ME-CFS circles. And it has an interesting backstory because the reason by which it actually came to be found that it could help ME-CFS was by accident. A group of oncologists in Norway were treating some ME-CFS patients who had cancer. And so the primary focus of the treatment was the cancer. They weren't trying to help with the ME-CFS. But they gave these patients a cancer drug, not a chemotherapy drug, but an immunotherapy drug, can play a role in defeating someone's cancer. And they gave them Rituximab, and Rituximab basically kills a range of plasma B cells. And as I said, the B cells are what produces autoantibodies. So they gave them Rituximab with the hope that there would be an immunomodulatory effect on these patients' cancer. But what actually happened is all three of these patients improved dramatically from ME-CFS. And this got the Norwegian group thinking, what's going on here in relation to the immune system and autoantibodies. So they then followed this up with two phase 2 clinical trials, which had a very overall positive response in that 2/3 of the ME-CFS patients in both of those trials showed a moderate to major lasting improvement. So that was all very encouraging. A phase 3 and much larger trial failed to show improvement between the ME-CFS patients and the placebo group. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about why that might be. Some people think that it was to do with the dose of the Rituximab, it wasn't high enough. Other people think it might be because these patients were not screened properly to ensure that those are the patients who have these autoantibody problems, because not every ME-CFS patient does have them. But for whatever reason, the trial did not succeed. The other concern about Rituximab is it's a very hard-hitting drug. It has a lot of quite unpleasant side effects, and it is, as I say, killing a range of the B cells, and that's not going to create a pleasant experience for the person who's undertaking the drug. And I believe, subject to being corrected, but I believe that Whitney Defoe, the son of Professor Ron Davis, who became bedridden with ME-CFS, that it was actually Rituximab that tipped him into the very severe state that he sadly ended up being in for many years, and he's somewhat better these days, but he's still severe. It's not a treatment to be considered lightly. I personally would not try Rituximab, but it does show us that the autoantibodies are playing this role in ME-CFS, and treatment options for that are worth pursuing and researching. So the second treatment that is in this paper is Efgartigimod. I don't know about you, but that sounds like the name of an orc from the Lord of the Rings, and I can just imagine, some line from Tolkien saying that Efgartigimod tried to snatch Frodo's ring. But it's actually a drug which targets a factor in the blood which prolongs the half-life of immunoglobulins. Immunoglobulins, IgG, basically there are various classes of immunoglobulins, but they are comprised of autoantibodies. So if you target immunoglobulins, you also in some way can modulate or affect the autoantibodies. And so what this drug is doing is it is shortening the half-life of the immunoglobulins, basically increasing the speed at which they're broken down. And by doing that, the thing is that autoantibodies are constantly in a cycle of, being created, maintained, and then broken down and renewed. And the natural life cycle, I believe, of autoantibodies is around 4 months. But with this, Efgartigimod, the orc, you would actually increase the speed at which they're broken down and therefore have a renewal of autoantibodies, which may be more healthy the next time round. So it's kind of a sneaky way of trying to change the situation. Now, a recent study in POTS patients who got POTS from COVID infection, however, found that there was no significant effect. And this may be, as noted in this paper, because patients were not screened for whether or not they had the autoantibodies, and also perhaps just there weren't enough patients used. Nevertheless, we'll keep an eye on Efgartigimod and see if better results may exist in the future. This video is sponsored by Normalyte. Now, I have been using Normalyte for 3 years, and it is the most helpful supplement that I have found in managing my own condition. Like a lot of ME-CFS patients, I suffer with low blood volume, and Normalyte is a highly effective strategy for combating this issue. It is a form of oral rehydration solution, and one study by Meadow et al. From 2019 found that this kind of formulation can boost blood volume as effectively as a saline IV. When I drink Normalyte, I really notice the difference. I can feel the blood volume expanding throughout my body, my legs become lighter, my nervous system calms down. Even better is that Normalyte has been specifically created for patients with illnesses like ME-CFS, Long Covid and POTS. So check out the link below to order your own bags of Normalyte. I personally enjoy the pure flavour, but it does come in a range of options. And now we come to the third treatment and a drug which a lot of people are getting very excited about. It was discussed at the recent Charité University Berlin conference, and it's called Daratumumab. Now Daratumumab, very interestingly, has come out of the Norwegian group, the same people who did the Rituximab. And so they were looking for a drug that could help with the autoantibodies that would be more targeted with less cytotoxicity, less side effects. And Daratumumab may well fit that bill. And what it does is, unlike Rituximab, which kind of just targets a range of B cells indiscriminately, Daratumumab targets B cells and also other cells which specifically have a higher quantity or production capacity of autoantibodies. So it's much more targeted, and it also has less of a side effect profile. So what the Norwegian group has done, this is not actually talked about in too much detail in the Scheibenbogen paper, but in the recent conference it was discussed. They've done a small study in 10 ME-CFS patients, which found that 6 of those patients essentially recovered from using Daratumumab. Their short-form physical functioning assessment essentially doubled over the course of the treatment, bringing their scores to within normal range. And these people, they went from being able to do 3,000 steps a day to 10,000 steps a day with no post-exertional malaise. And this happened after at least 4 injections of Daratumumab, but in some patients there was an additional 3 injections. And now, 3 years after this study, 3 or 4 of these patients remain in full remission from ME-CFS, 2 or 3 remain in partial remission, and some of those are going to be getting further treatments. So this is a really interesting possible treatment approach. What the Norwegian group is doing is they're applying for funding for a much larger study that will involve 66 patients. From there we'll see what happens. Perhaps this could fully succeed where Rituximab did not, and if it can actually go through trials, perhaps, here's hoping, but maybe medical systems around the world could take note and start thinking that they could offer this as a treatment for ME-CFS and Long Covid patients. So Daratumumab, very exciting, one to watch with this current study and for the future. Okay, so as I said, we're going to skip over immunoadsorption. You can watch my previous videos on that. And we're going to come to Berlin Cures 007. Now, I also did a previous video, very optimistic one about Berlin Cures, about a year ago, in which I was, speaking very positively about this treatment. It's a kind of DNA aptamer drug, which is a very new kind of technology. Basically creates these synthetic antibodies that can target in a very specific way autoantibodies that may be exerting a negative effect. And so Berlin Cures targets very specifically the G protein coupled receptor autoantibodies that are most implicated in ME-CFS, binds to them, neutralizes them, and thereby exerts a positive effect on the pathophysiology. And early case studies in Berlin Cures showed really positive results, with some patients, essentially getting completely cured from Long Covid, and then a follow-up study looking at its role in heart failure was very positive because some of these autoantibodies also play a role in heart failure. But the big disappointment was that Berlin Cures failed its Long Covid trial, with no obvious positive effect vis-a-vis the control group. Now, some people think that the study wasn't designed very well. I think that as well myself from what I've been able to discern. But here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Berlin Cures is not dead in the water. I'll do a video about this soon. Actually, a new company has formed to try and test the drug again. So there's going to be a second attempt to see if this can pass a trial for Long Covid and become what could be the world's first, treatment approved specifically for that condition, which is so important because that is what gets this treatment available to people in national health services and also covered by insurance. So the effort is ongoing with Berlin Cures. The story is not over yet. And a different study recently by a university found that Berlin Cures was effective for long COVID patients and improved people's symptoms after one dose. So the story is not over. Let's keep an eye on Berlin Cures. Let's see what happens. It'll take time, but the effort to bring it to ME-CFS and long COVID patients is still being perpetuated. Okay, so that's Berlin Cures. We finally come to immunoglobulins, or intravenous immunoglobulins rather, IVIG, which is a treatment that actually has quite a history in ME-CFS. I mean, there was a paper in the Charité conference recently, a presentation where someone reviewed papers from the 1990s where this was being used for ME-CFS with really good effect. And I know someone personally that I was talking to recently who uses IVIG for her POTS and has done so for many years. And she went from having, all the blood pooling and the purple feet and passing out just from standing up. All of that went away when she started to take IVIG, and she continues to do that once a month. But basically, IVIG is a way of modulating the immune system. It is a way of, when it comes to these autoantibodies, kind of blocking their effects, increasing the positive effects of autoantibodies to kind of downregulate the negative ones of autoantibodies that may be there. And it's basically an infusion of healthy autoantibodies from a healthy donor. And so they go in and they kind of will modulate the immune system, kind of interfere with the negative autoantibodies and kind of try to balance things out. This paper by Scheibenbogen speaks positively of IVIG. It points to a few papers that have shown positive effect in post-COVID syndrome, i.e. long COVID, which was done over 10 months and with a dose every 3 weeks. And it showed, interestingly, that the small fibre neuropathy that these long COVID patients had, that kind of, which causes that sort of, it's the death of the small fibre nerves, but it causes this kind of pins and needles burning pain, which I get to some extent actually, not terribly, but to some extent. But actually that small fibre neuropathy, that the pain went away over the course of the treatment, showing us that there is this very significant role that autoantibodies play in the development of that problem specifically. So IVIG, if you can get it covered on insurance somehow, is worth considering. It's otherwise horrendously expensive. So that's it for this paper that we're talking about. Those are the range of treatments that it was discussing. So where does that leave us? Well, I think it leaves us with a few conclusions. The first is that autoantibodies play a really important role in these illnesses for a significant number of patients, not everyone, but for a significant number. Trying to find treatments that don't have an intolerable, side effect profile is very important to help out ME-CFS and long COVID patients. That we have several treatments that are being looked into that are highly promising for the future, including Berlin Cures and Daratumumab, and we should really keep an eye on these because one day they could become more established treatments for these conditions. We also need to remember, as I say, that not everyone will benefit, and one point that the authors of this paper make is that it's important to pre-screen patients. Do they have the autoantibodies? If they don't, there's probably not much point. There are other treatments that may be upcoming in the future that this paper mentions in passing. You can go and have a look at that if you're interested, but they're kind of much more theoretical at this stage. But basically, what I love about this is it's opening things up beyond just immunoadsorption. It's giving patients more options, and it's well worth watching. It's a fascinating area. It's one that shows just how unpsychosomatic ME-CFS is, and it's something that I think in time, once these therapies could become more known and more established for people with our illnesses, could lead to changing of perceptions and greatly improving quality of life, or better than that. That's it for this video. I hope you found it interesting. Have you tried any of these treatments? Would you consider trying any of these treatments? Please leave your thoughts down below. Please consider joining my newly launched Patreon and Discord research and treatment community. There's a dedicated Discord server with many different channels for sharing of treatment strategies, research questions where you get to interact with me, ask me questions, also submit questions for expert speakers, Q&A videos that I'm doing. We have a Zoom call once a month where we can all share treatment strategies, tips, and also ask me questions if you wish. The community costs only €5.50 a month or $7. It's a way of supporting my work. Also, I always want to put these kinds of videos, I don't want out for free, I don't want to hold anything back. So it's a way of supporting my work and also joining a community which is very focused on helping each other move forward and improve our quality of lives as ME-CFS patients. So please check out the links down below in the description box for that. That's it for this video. I will see you in the next one.